Alright everyone, welcome back. This is the second video of my exploration of the One D&D changes to species, or what we used to call race. Please view my first video if you haven't yet, and this one leads straight into it. So let's get into it. We got up to elves. Elves are very similar. They still have dark vision. They still trance instead of sleeping, which is very powerful. And there are three lineages or sub-races. So the sub-race idea has been replaced by lineages, as we discussed before. Elves don't get weapon proficiencies, even though dwarves do get tool proficiencies. They get some cool spells though, and who doesn't like free spells? Because everything's got to be magical these days. Wood elves, they get increased movement speed, even though smaller creatures do not get decreased movement speed. So that's interesting, I think. Anyway, elves are fun. I don't think anyone has ever played the game without being an elf at some time in their life. So let's get into it more with gnomes. Gnomes are interesting. They're one of those character species that they're either a joke. You know, I can remember when we played in earlier editions that gnomes were not taken seriously, and we used to have fun with them. But anyway, they are going off into two ways in which they seem to be like magical. They're obviously supposed to be artificers, but then also there's this forest gnome thing where they are more in tune with nature, I guess. Forest gnomes can speak with animals racially, even though you don't get languages from your species anymore. So it's interesting. Rock gnomes get this sort of prestidigitation using materials to create things. It's very interesting. It's obviously they're reworking this tinker idea, and it's good. I would argue that, don't get me wrong, I like gnomes, I like tinkers, I like artificers. I just wonder whether that whole technology boost wouldn't be more useful staying with humans, and in terms of why are humans so popular? They are popular in terms of playing species. They are the most popular playing species. But what I mean is, in most D&D worlds, human populations are the largest. Why is that? I think there's a lot of things that need to be done with humans to make them more viable. I think giving them more of a ability to change and invent new technology would be one of their attributes. I think that creatures that live a long time, like hundreds of years, like elves do, they would be more resistant to change. Conservative elderly elves could basically hold their culture back from any sort of new technologies for, hundreds, if not thousands of years, whereas humans with their smaller lifespan are more likely to innovate. Anyway, that's just my idea, and there's still the artificer, but these gnomes get this tinker ability. Halflings. I am beginning to wonder whether do we need gnomes and halflings. They seem to be very similar in terms of what they bring to the party. I get it. Like, I love Lord of the Rings. I love The Hobbit. The Hobbit's great. Halflings are obviously a ripped off version of Tolkien's Hobbits, which is interesting that, you know, D&D is quite willing to take orcs and, the idea of the elves and hobbits from Tolkien, but they're very protective of their own intellectual property with things like mind flayers and the Gith and stuff like that. So I don't know, halflings, they no longer have a sub-race, which is fair enough, quite frankly, because their sub-races weren't that different from each other. And so we've just gone back to a generic one. I'm pretty sure we'll end up with more being added in future books as things go, of course. You can still move through spaces occupied by larger creatures, but you can't finish in that space. That rule was a bit vague in previous editions and rules, so now that that's been clarified, the halflings have been nerfed a little bit. But they still get their luck, which really is the main thing. That's why they're still alive in this really rough world. Orcs, they're interesting. Now that half orcs are out, orcs are in as the preferred species filling that niche. They're sort of a mixture between the Player's Handbook and other splat books. And they can dash, and they've got extra hit points, so they're still a beefy fighter, and they are fun to play. I like orcs. I think they're great. They don't have to be evil. I think everybody knows that now. I can see that the place that they held in the past was as a convenient enemy, and it's like goblins, things that you could attack without any moral implications in a game. But I can see why they're being changed, and they're a fun race to play, and they've got a place in the game, I think, and it's good to see them here. I look forward to hobgoblins being added as well. Tiefling, they got a buff as far as I'm concerned. There's 3 different types depending on where they come from, and so abyssal, chthonic, and infernal. They get magic and poison spray, depending on where they are from. Hold person is very powerful. So I think they have improved well. I noticed that it's all part of this magic creep that I'm talking about, as everything gets some kind of spell. It's interesting. I have played a tiefling before. I find them a little bit boring, but it's a very popular class. The new race or species that has been introduced in this new futuristic D&D is the Ardlings, which is celestial beings born on the upper planes, and they basically are humanoids with the heads of animals. I think that you can have a lot of fun with this sort of thing. I think that it's overdue in the game because a lot of people do actually like to play characters like this. I think that it'll be interesting to see how it affects the game, because you have things like lion folk and lizard people and stuff like that. So how are they going to fit into it all? I think it's going to be good for the game, and I in particular have some ideas for a campaign with animal people in it, and I will probably do a video about that in the future. There are 3 kinds, just like the tieflings, depending on where they're coming from, and they're all good. I do like this one, the mule-headed one. I think that's interesting because mules are the mix of donkeys and horses. So it's not a donkey, it's a mule. It's not a horse. I don't know. I think aren't mules supposed to be sterile? Anyway, it's a strange looking creature. Insert memes here. And they get a lot of extra abilities and spells as well. I didn't see much in the way of like claw damage and things like that. That will be interesting to see how that develops. So as you can see, there's a lot in here. We've only briefly touched on it. I'll probably end up doing more videos about species in not only 1D&D but also in 5th edition. Please, if you have liked this video, like, subscribe and click on that notifications bell. I'll show you my sources so you can see where I've got my information from. The best one is of course D&D and Beyond. And thanks for listening, and bye for now.